we are at the start of a, digital transformation or whatever you want to call it. But, buzzwords aside, our world is changing and is changing rapidly and is changing dramatically. What you see in the US is data has become a commodity. There is much less flow from data from one service provider to another service provider to another service provider. It ends up at the desk of, the owner or the investor. If you take a couple of steps back and you analyze this industry and you look at this industry where there's so much money around, and then you see data in pockets, in silos, and investors not really in control of the data there are. It's ridiculous. That cannot go on. So transparency is a great thing to strive for, but it's the first step towards a situation where data is a commodity, and from there on roles will change. Because the data is there, the computer power is there to do predictive or prescriptive analysis, and from there on roles are going to change dramatically.
Yeah, go ahead, yeah.
I was just going to point to your question about what's happening in the US that might sort of influence Europe. In the last 2 years, we've seen something in the region of $2 billion invest into real estate tech startups. And there's well over 150 of those tech startups in the US now, a handful that operate in Europe. And I think what we'll see over the next few years in Europe, if the lessons to be taken from the US, is that we're going to see a lot more of those starting up. A lot will fail. A lot of those, 99% of them will fail because you acquire a certain mass and you get to a certain point and you start delivering revenue. But most of that $2 billion has been spent on companies which have no revenue and no clear way of monetizing what the data they've got. And I think that's the key element of, you can collect as much data as you want. If you can't monetize it, you're not going to be there very long, doing it very long.